Welcome back to my channel. It's Carebomman here. I'm so glad to see you for joining me on this brand new video. So just give you a quick update because of my personal reason. I have a lot of busy stuff going on for college in part-time, and I got day center on Thursdays morning every week. So I always do my best one if I can. Oh, I'd like to thank everyone who support my channel. Always remember to subscribe to my channel to keep my channel growing and stronger. So I will do another read aloud for you guys. It seems quite interesting to learn and listen. So as you'll be aware of that, because the Walt Disney Company is turning 100 years to celebrate behind the history of magic. So I'm going to read through this book. It's Disney Home and Range. This is published by Disney Wonderful Reading. Some of you are quite familiar with 2004 animated modern classic film. So some of you never heard of it before. I heard of it before. So let's try have a go for read to you guys. So sit back, relax and enjoy. Also grab a popcorn or wear your headphones if you can. Pearl was a farmer. Times were hard on her little farm. The path of heaven, but that didn't stop her from taking in a new cow in the need of a home. Everybody, this here is Maggie, the original Mrs. Happy Heather, Pearl announced. The patch of heaven, animals weren't quite as welcoming as Pearl. A show cow, said one cow doubtfully. Her name was Mrs. Caloway, and she wore a jaunty green and purple hat. Maggie looked around. The other animals were silently staring at her. Maggie smiled at them. Now, don't everybody speak at one time, she joked. Prim and proper Mrs. Caloway spoke first. Good morning. Margaret, she said. Wow, you're the biggest cow I've ever seen. A piglet told Maggie. Just then, Sheriff Brown arrived, leaping over the fence on his horse called Buck. Well, dang a bit, Buck. Take it easy. This aren't no Wodo, cried the sheriff. The sheriff didn't like excitement, but Buck certainly did. The sheriff had some bad news for Pearl. The bank's calling in everyone's debt. He told Pearl if they don't get their money in 3 days, they are gonna auction off Patch of Heaven. You know, Pearl, all you got to do is just sell off a few of the critters, he suggested. But Pearl was furious at the idea. Stop right there, Sam. They are family. You don't sell family, she bellowed. And with that, Pearl chased Sheriff Brown off her farm. It's still my property. Now get, she yelled. Pearl was heartbroken as she thought about losing her farm. I'm just plumb out of ideas, she told the cows. She walked sadly back to her house. Then Maggie had an idea. I say we go into town, butter up that sheriff's horse and get him to give us more time, she suggested. Grace, a happy-go-lucky cow, was very keen on Maggie's idea. Mrs. Caloway was not so convinced, but eventually she followed the others. Back in town, Sheriff Brown received a message. Rico, the famous bounty hunter, was on his way to town to collect a reward and to get his next job. Buck the horse was excited. His dream was to be a hero. "Boy, wouldn't that be a life?" said Buck to the sheriff's old dog, Rusty, riding with Rico, clean up the rest. When the cows reached town, Grace slapped the banknote down in front of Buck. "Give us 3 more weeks," Maggie said. We have at least $60. You're from his history." Buck interrupted. Rusty explained to the cows that they would need at least $750 to save the farm. "Where are we going to get that much money?" asked Grace. At the moment, Rico galloped into town, ready for his next job. He found out that the only outlaw left to catch was Alameda Slim, the cattle rustler. What's the bounty?" asked Rico in a gruff voice. "It's $750, answered the sheriff. This gave Maggie an idea. If the cows caught Alameda Slim, they could collect the reward and save Pearl's farm. "Ah, that's a sensible idea," said Miss Caloway mockingly. "I'm going to need a fresh horse," Rico told the sheriff. Buck saw this as his big chance to impress Rico. He raced around, did push-ups, and even danced on the roof. Rico pointed at Buck. He'll do the bounty hunter settled a Buck, then slipped a poster of Alameda Slim into a saddle bag. "Rico's saddle. I'm wearing a Rico's saddle," Buck shouted proudly. Meanwhile, Maggie spotted a chuck wagon. She suggested to the others that they follow the wagon to the cattle drive. She reckoned that this would be where the cattle wrestlers would strike next. Mrs. Caloway refused to go on such a ridiculous mission. She and Maggie started off to the fight, and poor Grace was caught in the middle. The dispute caught the sheriff's attention. He thought the 3 cows belonged to the owner of the wagon, so he tied them to the back of it. Soon the wagon rolled out of town. Buck and Rico headed off in the other direction. After a while, the wagon and the cows passed a range that was being auctioned off. "What's going to happen to the cow who lived there?" Grace wondered. "She'd be okay," Maggie replied. "How do you know?" asked Grace. "We are looking at her." "What's that? What's the answer?" Maggie explained. "That she used to have a family like the one at Patch of Heaven until Alameda Slim stole the most of her cattle and left the ranger penniless. Night fell as the wagon neared the campsite. Cowboys sat around a blasting fire while fans of cattle slept all around them. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out in the darkness, and some cattle rustlers stormed the campsite. They were called the Williey brothers. The rustlers knocked out all the cowboys and tied them up. Moments later, Alameda Slim stomped in, riding his huge buffalo called Junior. "Come on, girls," shouted Maggie. "Time to loose those ropes." Maggie and Mrs. Caloway managed to free themselves, but Grace became even more entangled. Then Maggie charged at Slim. Surprisingly, Slim ripped out his guitar and started to Yido. Maggie and Miss Caloway were spellbound by the sound, but tone-deaf Grace wasn't affected at all by Alameda Slim's facial stunts. "Maggie, Miss Caloway, snap out of it," pleaded Grace. Grace tried to save them, but she was still tied to the wagon. When the wagon started rolling downhill, it knocked into the Grace and tossed her up onto his roof. Next, the wagon scooped up Maggie and Mrs. Caloway. Then Rico and Buck arrived on the scene, only to be sent flying by the out-of-control wagon. Meanwhile, Slim and Williey escaped with a herd of cattle. Maggie, Grace and Mrs. Caloway were more determined than ever to catch Slim and his partners in crime. They followed the tracks of the stolen cattle. Who better to catch the cattle thief than a cow? Reasoned Grace. Slim and the Willies were hiding with the stolen cattle in a deserted mine. Slim was bragging that he had put most of the local farmers out of business. Then Slim ducked behind a screen and came back out in a different clothes. "This here is the disguise I used to sneak into all them auctions and buy all that land. You told Willies?" He explained that they used a different name at the auctions. Yodel. Slim looked at the map of the area and spotted a little farm that he hadn't noticed before. "It's called Patch of Heaven, Uncle Slim," said Phil. "Really? It goes to auction on Thursday morning." Slim made plans to go to the auction disguised as Odo. Every last echo counts. He snared as branded section of a map marked Patch of Heaven. Back in the Patch of Heaven, things looked grim as the farm and his animals were about to be auctioned. Pearl was worried about her cows. "I don't know what's worse, losing my farm to the highest bidder, or knowing that my girls are lost and alone out there," she fretted. Out on the range, Maggie, Grace and Mrs. Caloway had met Lucky Jack, a friendly, pig-legged jackrabbit. They learned that Lucky Jack had a problem. "Until recently, I had a home, echo mine," he told them suddenly, but some land-grabbing bandits moved in and flushed us out. Jack spotted a poster of Slim and pointed at, "This is the low-down outlaw who robs me of my beloved echo mine," he cried. "You mean this no good ferment is hiding out in echo mine right now?" asked Maggie. "Without a doubt," said Jack. They all agreed to go after Slim together. Both fine bounty hunters. "Now I have seen everything. Let's get get moving, ladies, Jack suggested. When the group got to the mine, they were surprised to see Buck already there. Slim's Buffalo Jr. was refusing to let the horse in. Cows only, growled Jr. We've got the separate for the herd. Grace told Jr. so. Let the cows and Jack in. Once they were inside the hideout, Maggie suggested a plan to get Slim. You to get his attention while I sneak up behind him, she said. I'll lock him out into the cart, and then we wipe him up. I will him to justice. The cows and Jack found Slim counting a pile of money. Slim had already sold the stolen cattle to Mrs. Wesley, a seedy city slicker. It was time for action. Mrs. Caloway and Grace tossed Slim high in the air. Maggie caught him in a minecart, then Lucky Jack quickly tied Slim up with a rope. Let's get out of here, yelled Grace. With Lucky guarding Slim in the cart, the cows raced for the way out. The Willies charged to their uncle's rescue. Then Junior, Buck and even Rico joined in the crazy chase for the mine's tunnels. Everyone spelled out of the mine, crashing into the Wesley's train. Its carriages were all loaded up with the stolen cattle. Slim broke out of the cart and recaptured the cows. Then Rico arrived at the scene. Buck overheard Slim introduce Rico to Wesley. Let me present a most treacherous, double-crossing gun for hire that I ever had the pleasure to call the partner, boasted Slim. He handed Rico a huge braid of cash. You too kind, boss, said Rico. No, it can be, whispered Buck to himself. He had thought Rico was a hero, but all along Rico had been in cahoots with the evil smile, Slim. Slim put on his disguise. Now, if you'll all pardon me, that's a little patch of heaven on the auction block this morning, he said as he rode off. He's going to buy our farm, whimpered Grace, as Weasley and the Willies herded them back onto the train to join the other cows. Rico prepared to ride away on Buck, but a furious horse had the other ideas. Buck decided to give Rico the ride of his life. The horse galloped towards the train, bucking wildly. Rico could barely hold on. Maggie, Grace and Mrs. Caloway watched through the slats of the box cart. Make a break of it, ladies, Buck called out to them. Run. Buck, have you gone crazy? Shouted Maggie. Maybe I'll just figure out how the real wheels are. Buck yelled back. The three cows tried to smash through the doors, but the lock held fast. This is useless, said Mrs. Caloway. Let's put our heads together. More brains and less brown. All right, said Maggie, and she threw Mrs. Calloway's precious hat out of her carriage and ranged. Mrs. Caloway charged the door, smashing it to the pieces. The cows rushed out of the train. Buck knocked out the Williey brothers with a couple of cry kicks. Meanwhile, the three cows gained up on Rico. Bravo, you stopped Rico cold. Buck congratulated the cows. But then they realised it was nearly time for pearls to be auctioned. Unless we sprout wings, we'll never make it back in time, moaned Grace. Mrs. Caloway was not about to give up. This train goes right by the patch of heaven, she exclaimed. We caught Slip once, and we shall do it again. Who's with me? Buck freed the rest of our cattle from the train. We are free, they yelled, as they stampeded onto the puree. Buck uncoupled the engine from a cattle cars. Maggie and Grace and Mrs. Caloway started the engine, while Buck and Lucky Jack jumped aboard. They had no time to lose. The engine raced down the tracks. Suddenly, the cows, Buck and Jack saw another train heading straight for them. Jack spotted a track switch. Hop on, shouted Buck, and the two of them jumped onto the tracks. Buck and Jack used Jack's peg leg to flip the switch. The cow's engine moved safely to another track. See you back in the farm, girls, called Buck. And a patch of heaven, the auction was coming to the end. The sheriff panted his gavel loudly. Sold, he declared. Pearl's farm had completely bought by Alameda Slim, disguised as Odell. Odell's a name. Foreclosures a game. He sniggered to the sheriff. Pearl watched this with a heavy heart. She'd just lost her beloved farm or her animals. At the moment, the train engine carrying the cows thundered into view. Run for your lives, shouted the sheriff. Seconds later, Maggie and Grace and Mrs. Caloway stood facing Slim. Slim couldn't believe his eyes. It can be, he stuttered. Grace and Maggie kicked Slim high into the air, into the train smokestack. Mrs. Caloway turned up the engine steam to full blast. The steam blew Slim's disguise right off him. It's Alameda Slim, the astonished sheriff exclaimed. Alameda Slim, you are under arrest, he declared. Losing the rustler. Since Pearl's cows had caught Slim, the sheriff gave a Pearl for reward money. Woohee! My farm is saved, hooted Pearl. Grace and Mrs. Caloway agreed that farm was saved thanks to Maggie's brash race. You know, maybe I could hang around a while, said Maggie, smiling at her new friends. How about forever? Suggested Grace. Maggie couldn't think of anything she would like more. The end. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for listening to my video, what I read to you. It's quite interesting, because this year, as we are celebrating Disney's 100-year anniversary, since it first came in 1923. Can't believe it's been a century old. So, I'd like to thank you for giving likes and subscribe to my channel, and sharing this video. If you can't, give a thumbs up for like. I hope you enjoy this video. So, please stay tuned for the next week to that video. So, I'll see you next time.